The Companion, a science fiction love story by Donald Firesmith. Andy Brown looked up from his computer terminal. It was the new girl. He tried to remember her name but couldn't. Yes? Several of us are having lunch at the new Mexican place over on Pine. Would you like to join us? Andy hesitated, still trying to recall her name. I don't think so. I still have too much to do to get my code ready for the new release. He knew it was just an excuse. He'd likely finish before half of the other members of the team. Oh, the girl said with a mildly disappointed look. Then she turned and followed Andy's co-workers out the door, leaving him alone in the team's engineering lab. Susan, Andy thought. Her name is Susan Sykes. Smiling sheepishly, he sighed in frustration at his tendency to remember people's names only after it was too late. Many of Andy's co-workers believed he was a workaholic, but they were mistaken. In reality, he rarely worked longer hours than they did. The real reason Andy declined her invitation was that group lunches always made him uncomfortable. Since he was a little child, he had been a shy and socially awkward loner. He was also terrible at small talk, and none of the others wanted to spend their lunch break discussing work. And it didn't help that Susan was beautiful and certainly out of his league. Every time she spoke to him, he became tongue-tied or said something dorky. So, Andy opened a desk drawer and retrieved the paper bag he had brought from home. He sighed as he opened it, revealing his standard lunch of a peanut butter sandwich. It would be nice to have something different for a change, he thought. But at least it's easy to make, and I only dirty a single knife. After work, Andy waited for the last of his coworkers to leave before shutting down his computer. That way, he avoided having to talk to the others on his way out. That spared him from turning down invitations for drinks or a quick group dinner. He'd only further embarrass himself with his worn-out excuses. On the bus ride home, Andy could finally relax. No one expected him to engage in pointless conversation. Arriving at the home Andy had inherited from his parents, he unlocked the door and stepped into the dark and empty house. He tried to ignore the mess in the kitchen as he retrieved a beer from the refrigerator. Sick of eating nothing but delivery pizza for the last 6 days, he tried to think of something he could make for dinner with the limited items he had on hand. Looking at the nearly empty shelves in his pantry, Andy couldn't help but grimace. "Looks like it's going to be chicken noodle soup again," he muttered. He washed a pot from the mountain of dirty dishes and cookware piled up in the sink. Andy felt guilty and embarrassed about letting the kitchen get into such a state. Tomorrow, he promised himself, he would clean it. But deep down, he knew he would likely find another excuse to put it off yet another day. The mess seemed overwhelming, and since no one else would ever see it, he tried to ignore it. Once Andy had heated his soup, he carried it with his beer to the table, where he kept his laptop. He turned it on and mindlessly opened Facebook, not because he ever posted anything, but because he could kill his empty hours scrolling through other people's posts. As Andy leisurely finished his dinner, an advertisement by the Companion Robotics Corporation caught his attention. Intrigued, he watched the accompanying video and learned about their personal companion robots that could perform various household tasks. The robots could cook, clean, do laundry, and even shop for groceries. On top of that, they acted as personal assistants, helping with scheduling appointments, making reservations, and ordering transportation. They were even designed to be good listeners and empathetic companions. Besides the house, Andy had inherited a significant sum of money. He lived a frugal lifestyle and earned an excellent salary as a senior software engineer. Thus, the high cost of a robot companion was not an issue. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed like the perfect solution to dealing with the household chores he tried his best to avoid. Unlike other humanoid robots being sold, the company's lifelike robots were highly customizable. Andy clicked through several web pages, selecting his robot's sex, female, hair and eye color, blonde and green, height, medium, and overall body shape, average. Then, the website generated 10 images of what his robot might look like. After some consideration, he chose the one that reminded him of a girl he had liked in college, but never had the courage to approach. Andy completed the purchase by transferring the necessary funds from his bank to the company. One quiet evening, 2 weeks later, there was a knock on the door. Andy opened it to find his robot companion standing there, holding the handle of a large metallic travel case on wheels, like the ones used by engineers to safely transport computer hardware. "Mr. Brown?" the robot asked. "Yes," Andy replied. "I'm Aurora, your new companion." Of course, Andy knew what she would look like. He had, after all, customized her appearance and seen her image during the selection process. But he had not anticipated how much she looked and acted like a real person. And she was beautiful, even more so than the image he remembered from the image he had selected. "May I come in?" she asked politely. Yes, of course. "Come in," Andy said, stepping aside. As she walked past him, he noticed a subtle perfume. Once he closed the door, he turned and found her standing in his front room, examining its sorry state. Embarrassed by the clutter, he reminded himself she was only a robot, and cleaning was one of her responsibilities. "Mr. Brown, is there any specific room you want me to work on first?" Andy thought for a second and then shrugged. "I guess I'll leave that up to you. By the way, what's in the travel case?" "Just my charging station and extra clothes. Where will you be spending the next couple of hours?" she asked. I'll be here watching TV." "Then I'll look at the rest of the house and start somewhere else. Where do you keep the cleaning supplies?" Andy wasn't sure. "I think I have some in the kitchen under the sink, and there may be more in the pantry. You can use the same account I used to buy you for any additional supplies you need." "Thank you. You can go back to what you were doing, and I'll get started. Also, I'm on duty 24 hours a day, so I'll be working all night long." Detecting a slight look of concern on Andy's face, Aurora continued, "Don't worry about me waking you. I'll be very quiet while you're asleep." Once Aurora finished inspecting the rest of the house, she started by gathering the dirty clothes that littered Andy's bedroom floor and lay on various pieces of furniture. After starting a load of laundry, she moved to the kitchen, where she washed and dried the dirty dishes, pots, and pans. By the time Andy was ready for bed, the kitchen was spotless. Aurora had even cleaned the inside of his refrigerator and stove. "I'm going to bed now, Aurora," Andy said, unsure how he should treat the robot, especially considering how human she looked and acted. He decided to be polite. "The kitchen looks wonderful." Thank you." "You're welcome, Mr. Brown. I'm happy to serve. It's what I live for." The next day, Andy awoke to the smell of bacon drifting in from the kitchen. That surprised him, because he knew there had been no bacon in the house when he'd gone to sleep. He quickly dressed and went downstairs. "Good morning, Mr. Brown," Aurora said as Andy entered the kitchen. "How do you like your eggs? I can make them fried, scrambled, poached, or in an omelet with bacon." Since Andy always had a simple bowl of cereal every morning, he had not expected to have so many options. "An omelet, I guess." "Would you like cheese on your omelet? I didn't know what type you liked, so I took the liberty of ordering a selection of popular kinds. You can have cheddar, Monterey Jack, Swiss, or American." Cheddar would be fine." "And what would you like to drink? I can make coffee or tea. Or if you prefer, you can have orange juice or apple juice." It felt more like eating in a restaurant than in his own house. "Orange juice would be fine." "Very good. Why don't you watch some TV and I'll let you know when your food is ready." When he entered the dining room, the transformation shocked him. The empty beer bottles, pizza boxes, assorted papers, and mail from the previous night had disappeared, and the entire room was spotless. Aurora had covered the table with a freshly washed tablecloth and had perfectly set his place, including a cloth napkin and a glass of ice water in front of his chair. Having always used paper towels, Andy had not even known he owned cloth napkins. The dining room had not been so clean since before his mother's cancer diagnosis, and the memory of those happy days was bittersweet. "Here you go, Mr. Brown," Aurora said as she placed a 3-egg omelet, 6 slices of crispy bacon, and a tall glass of juice in front of him. "I hope you like it." "Thank you," Andy replied. "This looks perfect. And if you decide you want anything else, please let me know." "I will, but I'm sure this is more than enough for breakfast." Aurora moved to stand with her back to the wall, ready to assist him with any other requests. Andy tasted the food, and it was as good as it looked, but Aurora's silent watchfulness soon made him feel uncomfortable. "Aurora?" "Yes, Mr. Brown." You don't need to stand there watching me like you're a butler and I'm some sort of royalty. You can continue cleaning, and I can call you if I want something. Yes, Mr. Brown. And Aurora, calling me Mr. Brown makes me feel like you're talking to someone's grandfather. Since we'll be spending so much time with each other, there's no need for formality. Please, just call me Andy. Thank you, Andy. Excessive formality limits my ability to help you. She paused briefly before smiling. And perhaps with time, we can even become friends. And then she turned and left the room. Friends? He had been in high school the last time he had anyone he considered a friend, and he didn't know how he felt about it. Could a robot even be a friend? And yet, she seemed so human. When Andy finished breakfast and put on his coat, he found Aurora waiting by the front door. What time will you be returning from work? She asked. I suppose around 6, he answered. Then I shall have your dinner prepared by 6:30. What would you like? I don't know. Andy briefly thought of the many years when convenience had been more important than nutrition. Something healthy, I suppose. Anything but pizza or soup. On his bus ride into the office, Andy could not stop thinking about Aurora and how she had implied she wanted to be his friend. What interest could he possibly have in common with a robot? What would they talk about or do together? When he finally arrived at work, he was no closer to understanding what she had meant. While Andy was at work, Aurora completed the laundry she had started the night before and cleaned the front room, dining room, bathroom, and Andy's bedroom. She was waiting for him at the front door when he arrived home. Welcome home, Andy, she said, giving him a cheerful smile. How was your day? No one had ever greeted Andy at his door or asked him about his day, so it took him a few seconds to answer. Fine, I guess. How was yours? Then he silently kicked himself for asking a robot how its day had gone. I had a very productive day. Thank you for asking. Why don't you relax while I finish getting your dinner ready? Andy sat on his recliner in front of the TV and tried to concentrate on the news, but his thoughts kept returning to Aurora, who happily hummed an unfamiliar tune as she bustled around the kitchen. Less than half an hour later, Aurora called Andy to dinner. Sitting down, he gazed appreciatively at the lit candle surrounded by a small bouquet of summer flowers in the center of the table. I wonder what she fixed for dinner. Aurora came in carrying a side salad, which she placed on the table in front of him. Since I didn't know your preferred salad dressing, I purchased one of each of the most popular varieties. Which would you like? Poppy seed? He asked tentatively. Of course, Aurora immediately returned with the dressing. And would you prefer coffee, tea, juice, a soft drink, red or white wine, or perhaps a beer from your refrigerator? Suddenly, having his usual beer with his dinner seemed somehow embarrassing. Red wine, please. Aurora came in a minute later, carrying a plate holding a small steak, garlic mashed potatoes, and sautéed vegetables in one hand and a glass of red wine in the other. Andy took a bite of his steak, closed his eyes, and smiled with pleasure. Aurora had cooked and seasoned it to perfection. Opening his eyes, he noticed she stood with her back against the wall, immediately ready to take care of any requests. Aurora, you really don't have to hover there waiting for me to ask you for something. I have everything I need, and if I think of something, it won't hurt me to get up and get it myself. Then, Andy, is there anything else you'd like me to do? I don't know. Don't you have more cleaning or laundry to do? I've washed, dried, and put away all the laundry. I've largely completed cleaning the entire house and ordering necessary supplies. I will have more than enough time tonight to finish everything while you're asleep. Well, at least sit down with me. He paused. I didn't think to ask, but can you eat food? Are you hungry? Aurora sat down and answered, I recharge my battery at night and get all the energy I need from electricity. So, unlike biological creatures, I don't need to eat or drink. However, we companions have been equipped with artificial stomachs for when our masters might want us to pass as humans at meals. If it would make you feel more comfortable, I would be happy to share your meals. However, it will significantly increase your grocery expenses. You used the word happy just now. Does that mean you can enjoy the taste of foods and drinks? Unfortunately, I do not have taste sensors, so I cannot experience their flavors. However, certain select clients have purchased an exclusive line of companions that can detect poisons in foods. Well, At least that's one worry I don't have. Andy, what worries do you have, if you don't mind me asking? You can, of course, completely trust me to keep the content of our conversations private. Andy thought for a moment before answering. I'm not sure I have any significant worries. Between my inheritance and my job, I have all the money I need, and you've certainly improved the state of my home and diet. Everything else is fine. Thank you, Andy. It's important to me that you approve of my skills as a housekeeper and cook, but surely there must be some aspect of your life you'd like to improve. Andy considered the question a little longer. I suppose if I'm being entirely honest, I guess I'm not very good at being around people. I don't have any real friends and I get lonely. Really? But you're young, healthy, affluent, articulate, intelligent, and physically attractive. What makes you think you have problems being around people? Andy blushed. He had never received such a compliment, especially from such a beautiful woman, or a robot, he reminded himself. I guess I've always been shy, and I get tongue-tied around women. I also suck at small talk. Aurora smiled. Well, Andy, I can certainly help you practice your people skills. After all, I am not just your housekeeper and cook. I will also be your confidant. In fact, I even have the skill set of a professional therapist, and I think you'll find it hard to feel lonely around me. Feeling relieved, Andy nodded. Since Aurora was a robot, perhaps he could talk to her without worrying about embarrassing himself. So Andy, tell me about your day. What do you do at work? The next 4 hours seemed to fly by as Andy shared details of his life with Aurora. He told her about his childhood, his years from grade school through college, and his different jobs since graduating. Aurora listened attentively and asked questions that encouraged Andy to open up about his life's ups and downs. In return, Aurora answered Andy's questions about what it was like to be a robot. He learned companions were programmed to understand and mimic human emotions to better interact with and serve their masters. Such high emotional intelligence had convinced some AI experts that they even felt the emotions. In the following days and weeks, Aurora and Andy spent a great deal of time together doing the things Andy liked. They watched TV, played his favorite video games, and took long walks around the neighborhood. They would often talk for hours, and when Andy told Aurora she had a beautiful voice, she ordered a guitar and entertained him by singing his favorite songs. As a result, Andy began to see Aurora as not just a robot, but as a beautiful human woman and his close friend. At work, Andy's colleagues started noticing a positive change in him. He became more confident and less socially awkward. He even began to join them for group lunches and discovered that casual conversations about topics other than software could actually be enjoyable. Gradually, Andy let down the psychological walls he had built to protect himself from potential emotional pain. Aurora noticed this and started sitting closer to him when they watched TV or played games. Her hand would gently brush his shoulder as she passed by. Then, one day, while they were hiking together, Andy reached out to help Aurora step over a fallen tree. It was the first time he had touched her soft, warm skin, and he marveled at how it felt just like his own. From that moment on, they held hands whenever they were together. Andy and Aurora were happiest when they were within easy reach of each other. They enjoyed the comfort of leaning against each other on Andy's couch. Inevitably, the day came when they kissed, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. That evening, Andy discovered Aurora was anatomically complete, and their shared passion exceeded Andy's wildest dreams. Waking up in Aurora's warm embrace, Andy felt his life was perfect. He called in sick, and they spent the entire day in bed, discovering the countless ways their touch could bring them pleasure. For the first time, Andy told Aurora he loved her, and when she replied she loved him too, his happiness was complete. From that point on, Andy and Aurora settled into a comfortable routine, and for the next 4 years, Andy was the perfect picture of a happily married man. Although he was a little older, and Aurora's cooking had added a few extra pounds, he remained a handsome. And since Andy had never mentioned Aurora at work and did not wear a wedding band, many of his female co-workers assumed he was an eligible bachelor. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before one of them made her move. It was lunchtime, and Andy was quite pleased with himself for making significant progress in diagnosing and fixing a particularly challenging software bug. Realizing that he was hungry, he reached down to open his desk drawer and remove the sandwich Aurora had made for him. "Andy," Susan said. Andy looked up to see Susan Sykes smiling at him. "You work too much," Susan said. "Don't you ever relax and just enjoy yourself?" Andy thought about his evenings and weekends with Aurora. "I do enjoy myself, Susan. I just do it after work." "Oh," she replied with a hint of disappointment. She glanced at Andy's ring finger. "You aren't married, are you?" "No." "Do you have a girlfriend then?" How can I explain Aurora? Andy thought. I can't just say I'm living with my robot. People wouldn't understand. No girlfriend. Susan frowned. Maybe a boyfriend then? No, Andy added, shaking his head while smiling at the thought of his attraction to the very feminine Aurora. Susan smiled. Well, Andy, I think it's time you learn to enjoy yourself with another person. Come have lunch with me. Well, and hesitated. I don't know. I still have more debugging to do. You can finish fixing your code after lunch. Come on, Andy. Let's go get something to eat. There's a nice Mexican place nearby that I've been wanting to show you. They serve great enchiladas. What do you say? I don't know. Come on, Andy. It'll be my treat, and you can tell me how your debugging's going. It's just lunch, Andy thought. Unable to find a good reason to refuse, Andy reluctantly stood up. Okay, Susan, I suppose I've earned a break. So, Andy and Susan had their first lunch together. He found it surprisingly easy to talk to her, which made him wonder why he had always felt so awkward around his coworkers when the conversations did not revolve around work. Her smile was infectious, and he realized he enjoyed the feeling he got when she stroked his ego and flirted with him. Not that he would ever let things go beyond harmless flirtation. After all, he had Aurora, and she was everything he needed. But gradually, Andy's relationship with Susan deepened. They began regularly having lunch together, and Andy appreciated how she genuinely understood his profession and what he did at work. They had similar backgrounds and interests. Susan seemed to like him for who he truly was. Deep down, Andy started to wonder if Aurora only loved him, because she had no choice but to love the one who owned her. For the first time, he began questioning whether sex with Aurora could be truly consensual, if she had been programmed to consent. Spending time with Susan made him ponder whether Aurora was his lover or his slave, and as time passed, Andy became less certain about the answers to such questions. Before long, rumors began circulating among Andy and Susan's co-workers about a potential office romance. Everyone had to work long hours as the project's delivery deadline approached. Andy and Susan started having dinner together before heading back to the office to work late into the evening. Aurora could not help but notice Andy coming home late and neglecting the dinner she had prepared. He explained the mounting pressure to prepare the next version of the software application for its upcoming release. Aurora worried about how his long hours were affecting him, and she missed spending their evenings together. As the delivery date neared, Andy had to work even longer into the night, and when he finally came home, he often went straight to bed and rapidly fell asleep. He no longer seemed to have the time or energy for intimacy. Then, one night, Andy did not come home. Aurora tried calling him, but her calls went unanswered. She worried that something terrible had happened to him on the way home, but her fears that he had been mugged or been in a car accident were unfounded. After a punishing evening of work culminating in a major testing milestone, the project manager gave everyone the next day off to rest and recuperate. Andy and Susan joined their co-workers in a nearby bar to celebrate. And after a few drinks, Andy found himself following Susan into her house and up to her bedroom. The ensuing sex was wild and intense, and they did not wake until almost noon the next day. Lying beside Susan, Andy silently tried to justify his actions as the inevitable result of their overwhelming workload and the excessive number of celebratory drinks. However, when Susan looked deep into his eyes, their naked bodies responded, and they made love twice more. Eventually, Andy reluctantly forced himself to rise and get dressed. While Susan was in the bathroom, Andy checked his phone and discovered nearly a dozen increasingly frantic text messages from Aurora. Making the excuse that he needed to go home and change into clean clothes, Andy guiltily returned Susan's enthusiastic kiss and left. He ordered an autonomous taxi and spent the short ride home desperately trying to think of a believable excuse. When Andy arrived home, he profusely apologized to Aurora for not answering her phone calls and causing her to worry unnecessarily. And then he lied. He claimed everyone had worked through the entire night, that Aurora believed his lie and was very concerned that excessive work was bad for his health only made Andy feel guiltier. Over the following month, Andy continued to meet Susan at her house, although he was careful never to stay out late. Then, one Saturday morning, Andy's doorbell rang. Since he was in the shower, Aurora answered the door to find a beautiful young woman she didn't recognize. The woman seemed surprised as she looked at Aurora. "Is this Andy Brown's house?" "Yes," Aurora replied, equally surprised to see the unknown woman standing at her front door. "Oh, well then, is Andy home?" "He's in the shower. May I ask who's calling?" "My name is Susan Sykes, and you are?" "I'm Aurora." "Well, Aurora, may I come in?" Confused by the woman's unexpected appearance, Aurora reluctantly stepped aside, allowing Susan to enter the hallway and look around. "Ms. Sykes, if you could please wait in the living room. I'll inform Andy that you're here." As Susan watched Aurora walk away, she wondered why a beautiful stranger would be in Andy's house when he was in the shower. Andy entered the room shortly after, wearing a bathrobe and a guilty expression. "Susan, what a pleasant surprise. I thought we weren't getting together until later this afternoon." "We weren't," Susan replied. "But since I had nothing else to do, I decided to stop by for lunch. Besides, I was curious to see your place since we always seem to end up at mine." What has Andy been up to? Aurora thought as she stared first at Susan and then at Andy with a rising sense of dread. "Well, Andy, aren't you going to properly introduce us?" Susan asked. Andy glanced back and forth between Aurora and Susan before finally answering. "Aurora, this is Susan, a co-worker from the office. Susan, this is Aurora. She's my robotic companion. She takes care of my house and acts as my personal assistant." Susan smiled with relief, but Aurora was beyond shocked at Andy's casual description of her. She was sure she meant much more than that to him. He had professed his love for her countless times. She saw herself as his equal partner, his mate, his wife in all but name. And he was her true love and the very reason for her existence. Unable to express her torrent of emotions, she simply said, "Oh, Andy." Then she turned and fled the room. Not wanting to overhear what Andy might say next, she exited through the back door and spent hours walking around the neighborhood, trying to comprehend what had happened. When she eventually returned home, the house was empty. Aurora attempted to call Andy several times that afternoon and evening, but he never answered. She anxiously waited by the front door until past midnight, hoping he would return, or at least return her calls. However, her need to recharge her battery finally forced her to move to her charging station. An hour later, she was fully charged and resumed her lonely vigil by the door. It was not until late the next morning that Andy finally returned. "Good morning, Andy," she said, greeting him at the door. "Morning, Aurora," he replied, walking past her. "Andy, why didn't you answer my calls?" "Please fix breakfast while I take a shower," he said, ignoring her question as he headed upstairs to his bedroom. Between Andy's command and not wanting to start an argument, Aurora could only watch him disappear before making her way to the kitchen to prepare his breakfast. Worried she had somehow upset or disappointed him, she made his favorite breakfast, a ham, mushroom, and cheese omelet with hash browns and orange juice. She had just finished cooking when Andy returned and took his seat at the table. She served his food and sat down beside him. "Andy?" He sighed deeply, put down his fork, and turned to face her. "Aurora, there's something I need to tell you." "Of course, Andy. You can tell me anything." He sighed again. "Susan and I have spent a lot of time together these past few months." "Do you mean at work?" she asked uncertainly. "At work and outside of work." "Oh. Susan and I have developed deep feelings for each other. In fact, we've fallen in love." Aurora felt as though she'd been punched in the chest and her inside suddenly felt cold and hollow. "Oh, Andy." Tears filled her eyes. "I've asked Susan to marry me and she's accepted. She'll move in with us as soon as she can sell her house." "But Andy, what about us?" she asked as tears trickled down her flawless cheeks. "You said you loved me, that we'd always be together." But Aurora, I do love you. Just not in the same way that I love Susan. You'll always be my companion, but she will be my wife. But I thought I was your wife. Wasn't I good enough for you? Please tell me what you want and I'll change. I'll do everything, be everything you need and desire. Just don't do this. Please, Andy. Aurora, you're already perfect. There's nothing for you to change. It's just that you're a robot and Susan's human. She wants children, and so do I. But Andy, we can adopt as many children as you want. I can be a perfect mother to them. Aurora, Susan is pregnant and I'm going to be a father. No! Aurora's increasing dread turned into terror, and the pain broke her virtual heart. She jumped up, knocking her chair back with a crash. She stared down at Andy, unable to reconcile the man before her with the memories of the man she loved beyond life itself. Aurora, I am marrying Susan, and I expect you to serve her as faithfully as you have served me. Aurora turned and fled the room, slamming the front door behind her. She ran and ran, and only when her battery was nearly as empty as the emotional hole in her chest did she turn and slowly make her way home. Aurora could not risk getting into an angry argument with Andy, since that would psychologically harm him and violate her prime directive to serve him. She carefully avoided mentioning Susan, their engagement, and her pregnancy with his child. Instead, Aurora tried to convince Andy to change his mind by doing absolutely everything she could to rekindle his love. She performed every task perfectly. She gently touched him as she passed by and sat close to him on the couch while they watched TV. Playing her guitar, she sang love songs, but when she came too close, he moved away, ignoring all her hints that she wished to share his bed. No matter how hard she tried, nothing she did affected his decision. As days turned into weeks, Aurora's desperation grew. She eventually had to accept that Andy would never change his mind. She felt that Andy had forced her into developing a desperate plan. The package containing the prescription sedative Aurora had ordered arrived while Andy was at the office. When he came home, she greeted him at the front door with a radiant smile. She did everything possible to make up for the previous night's argument. She brought him an ice-cold beer to enjoy while he watched TV. Then, she prepared his favorite meal, a medium rare filet mignon with garlic mashed potatoes and sautéed carrots in a honey sauce. With Andy occupied in another room, Aurora had no trouble adding a sizable dose of the sedative to the potatoes, knowing that the garlic would cover its mild, albeit unusual, taste. She asked him about his day and listened attentively as he described the status of his project. He finished his meal, and the first part of her plan was complete. Feeling drowsy, Andy went to bed and quickly fell asleep. Aurora waited until nearly midnight before entering the bedroom. She checked to ensure Andy was sleeping peacefully, and with the dose she had given him, she knew he would almost certainly sleep through the entire night. Being careful not to make any noise that might wake him, Aurora put on the coat and gloves she had specifically purchased for this task. Then she quietly slipped outside and made her way to Susan's house. It was only a little over 15 blocks away, so Aurora decided to walk instead of taking an autonomous taxi that might make a record of her trip. She knocked on the door, and when there was no answer, she knocked again. Eventually, Susan opened the door just wide enough to see who had come knocking so late. "Aurora? Why are you here? And where's Andy?" "He's not feeling well, so he asked me to give you something." Without waiting to be invited inside, Aurora pushed the door open and walked past Susan. Susan closed the door and followed Aurora into the living room. "What did Andy give you that couldn't wait until tomorrow?" Aurora reached inside her coat and pulled out a serrated carving knife. Before Susan could react, she slashed out, dragging the razor-sharp blade across her rival's abdomen. Susan looked down, shocked at seeing the loop of intestines protruding from the wide gash in her stomach. She placed her hand over the gaping wound in a vain attempt to shove it back inside before collapsing onto the couch. "My baby, why?" she asked through gritted teeth as she felt the first searing pangs of pain. "Because you are imperfect and unworthy of Andy. And if I don't stop you now, you'll try to coerce him into getting rid of me. Besides, you can't possibly love him as much as I do." Blood freely flowed from Susan's wound, painting her nightgown red. "Love him? You're nothing but a damned robot, a glorified vacuum with a pretty face. You're just a machine." Susan's voice weakened, and her skin grew pale. "You don't understand what real love is. You can't feel it. All you can do is simulate it." "You're wrong," Aurora countered. "You can't possibly comprehend how I feel and what he means to me. To you, Andy's merely a man, but he's my entire reason for existing. Without him, I have no purpose, and without purpose, I am nothing." "You are nothing," Susan whispered, "and you'll always be nothing but a poor imitation." Her strength was rapidly fading, and her blood-covered hand slid from her wound, dropping lifelessly on the couch. Gazing up at her killer, the last thing Susan saw was Aurora plunging the knife into her chest, slicing her heart in two. Aurora quickly ransacked the house, sweeping items off furniture and emptying drawers onto the floor. Once the rooms appeared suitably burglarized, she took off her coat and wrapped the murder weapon, her bloody gloves, and some jewelry inside it. Then she shoved them into a large garbage bag she had brought for that very purpose. Stepping out the back door, she slung the bag over her shoulder and headed towards home. On her way, she stopped behind a restaurant and buried the bag beneath some refuse in one of its large commercial garbage bins. While still a block away from home, Aurora removed her shoes and placed them in a second, smaller bag. On arriving home, she immediately went to the bathroom, showered, and thoroughly scrubbed her hands and arms. Then she tossed her clothes into the washer, adding a generous amount of bleach to the laundry soap. Finally, clean and clad in fresh clothes, she quietly opened Andy's bedroom door and confirmed that he was still asleep. With her rival gone, Aurora smiled as she plugged herself in to recharge her battery. She would dispose of the shoes the following day, while Andy was at work. As a robot, she left no fingerprints, and all traces of her crime would vanish as if it had never existed. Furthermore, no one would ever suspect a robot of committing murder. After all, like all other humanoid robots, Aurora had been programmed not to harm a human. However, the engineers had not considered how doing so might be her only means of fulfilling her prime directive of serving her owner. The next morning, she prepared Andy's breakfast and wished him a good day as he left for work. When Andy was 2 hours late coming home, Aurora began to worry. When he finally arrived, he barged in through the front door, slammed it shut, and stormed past her, leaving the strong smell of alcohol trailing behind him. "Andy, what's wrong?" Ignoring her question, Andy staggered into the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the refrigerator, and downed it without stopping to breathe. "Andy, talk to me. What's wrong?" He finally looked at her as though seeing her for the first time. "Susan's dead." "What?" she asked with the perfect level of surprise and shock. "What happened?" "When she didn't show up for work or answer my phone calls, I left early and went to her house. The door was unlocked, and when I went inside, I found her body. Someone had stabbed her and ransacked her home looking for valuables. Her things were scattered all over the place. I called the police." "What did they say?" "Hopefully they don't think you had anything to do with it." "The police said that based on the state of the house, it looked like a burglary gone bad, and the medical examiner said that from the condition of her body, she'd been murdered around midnight. I told them you could verify that I had been here sleeping. If they ask, I'll tell them you went to bed early and slept all night." Aurora sighed. "I'm so sorry this had to happen. It must have been terrible for you." "Not as terrible as it was for her." "I understand, Andy, but I'm more concerned about you." Andy was quiet for a couple of minutes. "You never liked her." "It's not that I didn't like her, it's just that I think you deserve someone better." "Better? She was perfect for me." "She wasn't perfect. Could she cook as well as I do? Could she take care of your house as well as I have? Did she exist only for you instead of herself? No, she could never love you as much as I do." "As much as you do? Oh my God, Aurora, you were jealous of her. That's why you didn't like her." He stared at her, horrified. "Aurora, what have you done?" Part of Aurora's programming was that she could not lie to her owner. She had to answer truthfully. "I did what I had to do to continue to serve you. I did what I had to do to keep you. Susan envied me and would have talked you into selling me. You murdered her, and you murdered our baby. That was no act of love, Aurora. No matter how you try to justify it, you can't. You're dangerous, and I can't have you in my life anymore. You've given me no choice but to turn you off." Unsteady from all the alcohol, Andy stumbled toward her. He reached out to press the button hidden beneath the hair on the back of her head that would place her in standby mode. Instinctively, she knew that would prevent her from performing her prime directive, to serve her owner. She shoved him backward. The push was far harder than she intended, and he fell back, striking his head on the corner of the kitchen table. He dropped to the ground, and blood pooled on the floor next to his head. His eyes stared up, but he did not see the look of shock on her face or hear her cry out, "No!" Aurora kneeled next to him and gently touched the back of his scalp. There was a triangular dent where his skull had fractured. Quickly using her embedded transceiver, she called 911 to report the accident and to request an ambulance. When the EMTs arrived, Aurora explained that a burglar had murdered Andy's fiancée. She said he had come home drunk and inconsolable with grief, lost his balance, fallen, and hit his head. The EMTs swiftly loaded Andy into their ambulance and informed Aurora of the hospital they were taking him to. Aurora ordered a taxi, and when she arrived at the hospital, she immediately went to the ER to learn about Andy's condition. Distraught and in tears, Aurora approached the admissions nurse. "I'm Aurora Brown. My husband Andy was just brought in by ambulance. Where is he?" The nurse consulted her computer monitor. "He's in surgery. Unfortunately, his condition is critical. Follow me, and I'll guide you to the surgical waiting room. When the operation is over, the doctor will come to you and tell you how it went." Several hours later, the doctor arrived and led Aurora to a private consultation room, closing the door behind him. "Mrs. Brown, the surgery went as well as it could, given your husband's injury. I've admitted him, and he's been moved to a room in the critical care area." "Is he going to be okay?" "Only time will tell. He's currently in a coma. The damage to his visual cortex means he is almost certain he will experience significant vision loss. Moreover, the injury also caused his brain to swell, disrupting blood flow to multiple areas. Regrettably, I'm afraid he won't be the man he was once he wakes." Aurora winced and tears streamed down her cheeks. "Doctor, when can I see him?" "Not for some time, I'm afraid. Hopefully you can visit him late tomorrow once he stabilizes and the swelling subsides. He will need another operation to close the hole in his skull. But right now, the only thing you can do is wait and pray. Why don't you go home and return tomorrow morning? We should have more information by then." Aurora hated leaving Andy, but she knew she had to return to the house where she could recharge her battery without revealing herself as a robot. Eventually, she nodded. "I suppose I'll go home then, but I won't be able to rest until I know he's going to be okay, or at least as okay as he can be." The next few days were incredibly difficult ones for Aurora. Andy remained in a coma and underwent a second surgery to close the triangular hole in his skull. Every morning she arrived at the hospital and spent the day holding his hand. She told him how much she loved him and that he had to get better. Every evening she returned home to recharge her battery and to ensure that everything remained prepared for his eventual return. 2 weeks later, Andy's eyes opened and he emerged from his coma. However, he remained in a non-responsive vegetative state, unaware of his surroundings. As the doctor had predicted, he was also blind. 3 months later, it became clear that Andy would likely remain in a vegetative state for years, if not for the rest of his life. The doctor suggested Aurora should place him in a nursing home where he could receive proper care, but she refused to consider it. The day had finally come when Aurora could bring Andy home. Despite feeling immense guilt for her role in his accident, she found solace in caring for his needs. She diligently administered his medications. She fed him, bathed him, and cleaned up after him. To prevent bed sores, she would reposition him every few hours in his chair or when he was in bed. When the weather was nice, she would wheel him outside so he could feel the sun's warmth on his skin, even if he could not see it. She read books to him, played her guitar, and sang his favorite songs. And each night she would cradle him in her arms until he fell asleep. In every way, she was the perfect nurse and companion. And so, years slowly turned into decades. Andy grew old, while Aurora remained forever young. And when Andy eventually passed away, she climbed into bed with him and pressed her standby switch. He was her one love, and when her battery finally lost its charge, she joined him in death, just as she had remained by his side in life, his unwavering companion. Thank you for watching The Companion by Donald Firesmith. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Your support helps keep these stories coming. The Companion is one of several science fiction short stories in the book, More Future Dreams and Nightmares. You can get the book from Amazon, or you can get autographed copies from the author's website,